She stood in line, clutching her resume, heart pounding with hope. Then he, a manager with a smug grin, shoved her aside, right in front of a room full of clients. Their gasps echoed, but no one moved. Why did he do it? What made her stay silent? Or did she? This isn't just a story of humiliation. It's about what happened next, when she turned that moment into something no one saw coming. She was Maya, a 29-year-old single mother from Chicago, who'd spent years scraping by, working late shifts at a diner while studying for her business degree. Her hands trembled as she stood in that sleek office lobby, the kind with marble floors and glass walls that screamed money. She'd landed an interview at one of the top consulting firms in the city, a chance to finally break free from the grind. Her resume was crisp, her suit borrowed but sharp, and her mind raced with rehearsed answers. This was her shot. The line for the interview was long, filled with polished candidates in tailored suits, all eyeing each other like competitors in a silent war. Maya felt the stares, some curious, some dismissive, but she kept her head high. She'd faced worse. Landlords who'd turned her away, bosses who'd overlooked her for promotions, teachers who'd told her she'd never amount to much. Each time she'd pushed forward, fueled by a quiet fire to prove them wrong. The manager, a man named Richard, strutted through the lobby like he owned it. Mid-40s, slicked back hair, and a suit that cost more than Maya's rent. He barked orders at the receptionist while glancing at the candidates. His eyes landed on Maya, and for a split second, she thought she saw a smirk. She brushed it off. Nerves, maybe, but then it happened. As she stepped forward to check in, Richard moved toward her, his shoulder deliberately slamming into hers, pushing her out of the line. "You're in the way," he snapped, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room froze. Clients waiting in plush chairs turned, their eyes wide, some whispering. Maya stumbled, her resume slipping to the floor. No one spoke. No one helped. The silence was suffocating, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Maya's face burned, not just from the shove, but from the weight of every stare. She wanted to scream, to demand why, but her voice caught in her throat. She'd been here before, made to feel small, invisible, but this time something shifted. As she bent to pick up her resume, her fingers tightened around the paper. She wasn't going to let this moment define her. Why did Richard single her out? Was it her race, her war, Nout shoes, or just his need to flex power? The clients' shocked faces told her they saw it too, but their silence screamed louder. Maya could have walked away, head down, like she'd done so many times before. But something in her snapped, not into anger, but into resolve. This wasn't just about a job anymore. This was about every time she'd been pushed aside, every door slammed in her face. She straightened up, locked eyes with Richard, and made a decision that would change everything. Maya's heart pounded as she stepped back into line, ignoring the whispers around her. Richard had already moved on, laughing with a client as if nothing happened. But the sting of his shove lingered, not just on her shoulder but in her chest. She could feel the weight of the room's eyes, some pitying, some judging. The receptionist, a young woman with nervous hands, avoided Maya's gaze, pretending to shuffle papers. Maya wanted to call out Richard, to demand an apology, but she knew better. She'd seen what happened when you challenged men like him in rooms like this. You were labeled difficult, unprofessional, out of place. The interview room was next. Maya was ushered in, her palms sweaty, but her voice steady. The panel, 2 men and a woman, all in their 50s, smiled politely, but their questions felt like traps. "Tell us about a time you handled conflict," one asked, his tone clipped. Maya's mind flashed to Richard's shove, but she swallowed the truth and gave a rehearsed answer about a diner customer who'd refused to pay. She nailed every question, her years of late night studying paying off. But as she left, she overheard one of the interviewers murmur, "She's sharp, but is she a fit?" The word fit hit like a slap. She knew what it meant. Back in the lobby, Richard was still there, now schmoozing with a group of clients. Maya's stomach churned as she watched him laugh, his hand clapping a client's back like they were old friends. She thought about her daughter, Leela, waiting at home, asking when they'd have a real house with a backyard. This job could have been their ticket, but Richard's shove wasn't just a moment. It was a wall, one she'd crashed into her whole life. Race, class, circumstance. She'd always been on the wrong side of them. She could have left then, taken the L train home, and chalked it up to another bad day. But as she stood there, something clicked. She remembered a story her mother used to tell about her great-grandmother, a woman who'd faced down worse than a smug manager and still built a life. Maya pulled out her phone, her fingers shaking as she typed a name into a search. Richard Harlan, senior manager. The results were sparse, but one caught her eye, a LinkedIn profile with a familiar smirk. She dug deeper, her instincts kicking in. If Richard thought he could shove her aside and walk away, he was wrong. Over the next week, Maya couldn't let it go. She started asking around discreetly. A friend who worked in HR tipped her off about a networking event where Richard would be speaking. Maya didn't have an invite, but she had grit. She showed up, dressed in her best, and slipped into the crowd. Richard was on stage, charming the room with tales of his leadership. Maya listened, her jaw tight, as he spoke about building trust and empowering teams. The hypocrisy burned. After the talk, she approached him, her voice calm but firm. "Mr. Harlan, do you remember me?" From the interview line, his eyes narrowed, then flickered with recognition. He brushed her off, saying he was busy, but Maya didn't back down. "I'm sure the clients who saw you shove me would love to hear about your leadership style," she said, loud enough for a few heads to turn. Richard's face paled, but he forced a laugh, muttering something about a misunderstanding. That night, Maya went home and did more digging. She found a forum where former employees of the firm posted anonymously. The stories were chilling. Richard's name came up again and again. Bullying, favoritism, pushing out anyone who didn't fit his vision. Maya's shove wasn't random, it was his pattern. She reached out to one of the posters, a woman named Carla who'd left the firm after Richard humiliated her in a meeting. Carla's story was eerily similar, a public slight, a room full of witnesses and no consequences. But Carla had something Maya didn't, a contact at a local news outlet. Maya and Carla met over coffee, their shared anger forging a bond. Carla introduced her to a journalist, Sarah, who specialized in workplace exposes. Sarah was skeptical at first. Another corporate bullying story wasn't exactly front-page news, but Maya's persistence, her raw account of that day in the lobby, and the growing stack of similar stories about Richard caught Sarah's attention. They needed proof, something undeniable. Maya didn't have a video of the shove, but she had the clients' faces burned into her memory. She remembered one woman, older, with a pearl necklace, who'd looked horrified. Maya tracked her down through a client list Carla provided, a risky move that could have backfired. The woman, Ellen, was hesitant but agreed to talk. She'd been in the lobby that day and saw everything. "I couldn't believe he did that," Ellen said, her voice shaking. "I wanted to say something, but I froze." Ellen's guilt was palpable, and Maya saw an opening. She didn't push or accuse. She just shared her story, her voice breaking as she talked about Leela. Ellen's eyes softened. She agreed to go on record. With Ellen's statement, Sarah had enough to start building a story, but Maya wanted more than an article. She wanted Richard to face real consequences. She and Sarah dug deeper, uncovering emails from former employees who'd been pushed out by Richard's tactics. One, a man named Jamal, had kept screenshots of Richard's unprofessional messages, including one where he mocked a candidate's accent. The evidence was mounting, but Maya knew it wouldn't be enough to just expose him. She needed to hit where it hurt. Maya started attending more networking events, not as a job seeker but as a shadow, watching Richard's every move. She learned his habits, his connections, the way he worked a room. He was untouchable, or so he thought, with the firm's higher-ups backing him. But Maya noticed something. The firm was pitching a major contract with a city agency, one that valued diversity and inclusion. Richard's behavior, if exposed, could tank the deal. She reached out to a friend from her diner days, now a low-level staffer at the agency. Through him, Maya got a meeting with a program director, a woman named Linda, who listened intently as Maya laid out her story. Linda was furious but cautious. Accusations without proof could backfire. Maya handed over the evidence, Ellen's statement, Jamal's screenshots, Carla's testimony, and a dozen other accounts Sarah had verified. Linda's jaw tightened as she read. "This firm's been on our radar," she said. "If this is true, they're done." The article dropped 2 weeks later, a scathing piece titled "The Cost of Arrogance: How One Manager's Actions Could Sink a Firm." Sarah didn't name Maya directly at her request, but the details were unmistakable. The story spread like wildfire, shared across social media by employees, clients, and activists. The firm's stock dipped, and the city agency put their contract on hold. Richard's name was everywhere, his smirk plastered across blogs and X posts. But Maya wasn't done. She'd been quietly working on something else, a proposal. During her research, she'd studied the firm's gaps, their outdated strategies, their lack of diversity in leadership. She'd spent nights drafting a consulting plan, not for a job but for herself. Using her degree and years of real-world grit, she pitched a new diversity initiative to the agency, one that could replace the firm's contract entirely. It was a long shot, but Linda saw potential. "You've got nerve," she said, smiling. "Let's talk." Meanwhile, Richard was spiraling. The firm put him on leave, but the damage was done. Clients pulled out, citing cultural concerns. Former employees came forward with more stories, each one chipping away at his reputation. Maya heard through Carla that Richard had tried to call a meeting to clear his name, but no one showed up. He was alone, his power crumbling. Then came the twist. Maya's proposal wasn't just accepted, it was funded. The agency hired her as a consultant, not for the firm, but for their own diversity program. She'd gone from a decide candidate to a decision maker, sitting in rooms Richard could only dream of entering. At one meeting, she saw him across a conference hall, his suit wrinkled, his charm gone. He tried to approach her, maybe to apologize, maybe to save face. Maya didn't give him the chance. She turned away, her focus on the future. They say justice is slow, but for Maya, it was a fire that burned bright. In less than a year, she'd turned a humiliating shove into a victory no one saw coming. Richard was out, his career in ruins, while Maya was leading a program that reshaped how the agency worked. She didn't just get even, she got ahead, building a life for Leela that no one could take away. The clients who'd stared in shock that day, some reached out, apologizing for their silence. Others, like Ellen, became allies, amplifying Maya's work. The twist wasn't just that Maya won. It was that she'd been planning it all along, quietly, relentlessly, turning every slight into fuel. She didn't need Richard's apology. She needed his downfall, and she made it happen. Now she's not just a name on a resume. She's a force, rewriting the rules for those who come after her. What would you have done in that lobby? Would you have stayed silent, or would you have fought back? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone, and if this story hit you, smash that like button and subscribe for more real stories of justice and redemption. Let's keep the fire burning.